Hey, Scott. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Anything going on?
If you want to know the story of Jim Piggott,
Hey.
it can be found in what has become
I don't want you to go all that knowledge.
Every morning he comes and goes through the mayor. I'm gonna miss Jim Piggott.
It's fun. I will say that.
a second home to the veteran newsman for the past 4 decades.
Hey, Karen.
Jim, we're gonna miss you.
Where much of the city staff has really turned into his extended family.
Yeah,
I'm going to miss you. You've been the best part of my morning for the last year.
And then there's this,
What is today? Today, I can never know the 30th.
the sign-in book in the office of Jacksonville City Council.
Every page.
The vast majority of signatures
That's me.
were penned by Jim
A lot of people think I do old school reporting.
because he spends every morning
I don't do it on the phone. I start my day every day here. Now at City Hall here.
like a veteran newsman snooping around City Hall.
I'm just seeing what meeting's going on. I did it at the old City Hall, which was the City Hall Annex on Bay Street. When I worked in Indianapolis before I came here, that's how you covered it. Did you get my message yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Looking for the big news of the day.
You covered news by going to the source, and it just doesn't happen anymore.
Back in 1984,
His time in Jacksonville started in the 1980s.
Just so you know, I've been up here every day, every one of these mayors, and they, starting with Godbold, actually.
And the mayors knew if they had to deal with tough questions, they likely came from Jim Piggott. Jim Piggott, you dealt with him as mayor for 8 years. Let's start with a man who had to field Jim's questions for 2 terms. Former Mayor Lenny Curry.
Well, look, Jim always showed up he always knew the subject matter. He always asked good questions, and I always felt like he was fair and objective. But he's going to be missed for sure.
Curry dealt with reporters of all stripes for 2 terms. But one thing he knew with Jim, he would get an honest reporter.
You know when Jim Piggott walks in the room, you're probably going to get some questions you're going to have to deal with.
You know you're going to get questions, and you know you're going to get questions that are off subject. But he's going to do it professionally. He's not going to, in the middle of a press conference, for example, about books for children, start screaming at you about another controversial issue you may be dealing with.
Sure.
But he's certainly going to catch you when that press conference ends and get you before you walk out of there on the issue that matters to the people.
And then there's Mayor Donna Deegan, who knew Jim as both a reporter and colleague from her time in the media.
What does that mean for Jacksonville?
Finally, I'll get him out of my hair. You know,
Yeah.
The guy's up there every single day, rummaging through everything, walking through the offices. The truth is, he's doing his job, and he's always done his job. And I love Jim. I think he's done an incredible job of really making sure that people know what's happening in our city.
And while I was talking to Mayor Deegan, she made an interesting comment about Jim.
Listen, I wish him the best. And if he wants to, go the way of others of us, he can just come right on over and get into politics. We'll be ready.
But Jim's first story wasn't about city politics. Instead, it was about a crime issue in Jacksonville in the 1980s when a show called Miami Vice was popular.
What was the first story you did in Jacksonville?
It was called Jacksonville Vice. I came down, I went out with the Vice squad on Phillips Highway, and there was a photographer, myself. We would be in a motel room or a hotel room, and then the officers were out picking up guys and bringing them up to the hotel room, and we'd come out with our cameras and went, surprise!
And then the stories too many to count were on from hurricanes and elections to investigative pieces.
That's what we wanted to know.
Which brings us to this iconic promo from the Channel 4 vault, when Jim was dubbed the troubleshooter.
you've been slammed. I can straighten that out.
You can?
One way to promote the troubleshooter. I was the troubleshooter at Channel 4. So that was something we did one morning.
But with all the chaos he's seen and investigated, Jim always wound back up at the stories he prioritized over all others.
I've always thought local government.
That's what's happening in city government.
You start at the bottom here and then you move your way up. But this affects everybody, what happens here. And that's why I like covering City Hall.
But if you've watched Jim for any length of time, it's not just the serious.
But it's not just the hard news for you. We've seen you in bounce houses. We've seen you in hot tubs. We've seen you do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but I do. I enjoy that. I enjoy
This is something I haven't done in a long time.
just how everyday things, like you said, like you saw me in a bounce house. That was an event going on downtown. Of course I'm going to do that.
And for this story, Jim wore a special tie
This is a tie on my dad's.
to honor the real reason he got into broadcasting.
WIBC, Indianapolis. Former member of the Faith Assembly calls it a cult. I'm Joe Piggott, and this is WIBC News.
My dad was in broadcasting, in television, and in radio. It's something that's in my family. That's why I do this, is because of that. He was the voice of Indianapolis. He had a great radio show in the morning. He had 9 kids. I was one of them.
And that's where Jim started, back home in Indiana.
For 59 Headline News, I'm Jim Vincent. Have a good afternoon.
I did television up in Indianapolis, and all of that is because of my dad, who just kind of brought it along for me.
But everything else for the past 40 years?
Of course, there are the other ones like, well, these box heads. That's what seems to be.
We don't like the term box heads. We find that demeaning. We prefer to be called people with boxes on their heads.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Right here in Jacksonville. Scott Johnson, Channel 4.
I don't give a shit. Jim Piggott.
The local station.